Oh, golly gosh. Let's get comfortable. What a malarkey. The ring light, the bit that holds the phone, has broken. So you are currently on a camera leaning against a glass, because I'm technical, on top of the biscuit tin in like a metal trolley. What an exciting start to another week in my life. I said last week, I want to talk and get straight to the point about feeling lonely when you are single and live on your own. I don't think that that's required to feel lonely. I think loneliness is not spoken about enough. We associate it with being alone. Yet I definitely felt lonely within my relationship at times. So this is to anyone really that feels lonely at any time. You can feel lonely even when you're surrounded by your best friends, hundreds of people. Loneliness is a hard one. It's not a quick fix. I've can name points at which I felt lonely since I was 18. In the moment was able to go, I feel like I don't have friends. I feel lonely. As I've said that though, I think it probably extended to earlier in school years, some element of that. I just don't think I was aware of it quite so much, but on reflection, just saying it out loud now, yeah, there was probably an element of not feeling like I had that group per se, which it's hard because I feel sometimes when I say it, I feel like I'm insulting my friends. I wouldn't want them to think that they're not doing a good job because I still feel lonely. That's not fully on them. I think friendship is part of a kind of jigsaw puzzle that helps with loneliness, but it's not everything. It's to do with your perception of those friendships. I have read so much on concepts around loneliness. Lost Connections by Johann Hari is one of my go-tos for anything in terms of that. His book looks at depression and anxiety, which can bring on loneliness, but it's also the reverse. If you are lonely, that feeling can bring on depression and anxiety. It's not cause and effect either which way. They are related in some ways, and it's not always you can have depression and anxiety and not have that loneliness, I believe. So that's one of my go-tos because he talks about the disconnections we have and then also talks about how to reconnect. I've briefly mentioned that in a podcast episode before. If not, I would highly recommend the book. All my reading recommendations are on a link in my bio that has everything I've ever read that I would suggest reading, but Lost Connections will be there. And there's this element within that, and within my own observations, it seems obvious. You can instinctively find people to spend time with, or you can find something to do to distract your mind, which in the moment are good things. But I think taking a good hard look at your friendships can be really, really important. And not just friendships, but all relationships you have with everybody. Family, whether you are interested in or have a romantic connection or not, it might not be a full-blown relationship. It might be something that's on the side. I think situationships, when they are like that and they are frustrating, can cause loneliness because it's not meeting what you expect from what you're hoping will be a relationship, but is in fact a situationship because things aren't being spoken about and you're not expressing your needs. I think there's a separate side to loneliness where you can identify that you don't need or want a relationship, but you still feel lonely. And this came up, this concept of knowing certain things, but not feeling them as being two very different things. And they were saying that sometimes those that can be more intellectual, they understand it, they know, they get it, but then they don't feel it. And you can't try to rationalize and justify and understand. That is to a degree a coping mechanism, as opposed to experiencing the feeling, sitting with it and living through it. I think there's a balance. I think we should understand where it comes from, what's really going on. But I found this incredible, and I should be able to reference it, but I can't. This incredible 60-page document. It was from an institution or a group or something that's looked into loneliness, and the introduction was from someone that was the head of loneliness or something like that. So this is big. And yes, it did go into loneliness in older age, but it went through loneliness in a number of different ways. And I was fascinated by some of I haven't finished it because 66 pages is a lot of pages to get through, but it was looking at the ideas around understanding that it is how you potentially perceive things, how you feel about them. What is it that we're not getting from our friendships per se? This side of 2022, I've had 2 moments where I've felt that loneliness. One was last week and one was literally yesterday as I record this. So I didn't know that was going to come up right as I did it. I know that they're not isolated events. I know it's interesting. Today I've woken up slightly different. It's not there. That feeling is not there. So that's the loneliness that I feel. However, would it feel like it had reduced if I hadn't taken some action in both those instances? Would I still be feeling that way the next day if I didn't take the actions that I had on the days they were happening? First things first, I cry. I am a crier. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement to make. I like to cry. I don't think I've cried as much in the last 2.5 years as I ever have in my life. Before that, I would be like, when was the last time you cried? I'd be like, I have no idea. I don't know. Now I'm like, last week, 2 weeks ago. It's a frequent thing, but I much prefer that of the last 2.5 years to actually feel some things as opposed to some of the before. Where I don't think I really paid any attention, or I was very, very quick with methods to just move on and not think about it, which to some degree has its benefits, but at the same time, harbouring that, which was probably there in existence. My parents divorced. I think there's some stuff from there and becoming independent. At what point did I actually learn to cope with that? I'm not sure. And then how much do you harbour going on when something else negative happens? It also means that you're much more aware of when you are happy and content, excited, joyful, enjoying the moment. You're very aware of either end of the spectrum too, and you're not afraid to experience them. Because again, if someone would say to you, what moment were you really happy in your like teen years? That's quite a way away now, but even the early 20s, what was the best bit of uni or when you first started? I don't have pinpoints of those moments, which are harder to remember, might add. If you're scratching your head and thinking, when was the last time that I was really happy or had that real sense of content? We don't remember the happy moments as much as we remember the negative for some reason. There probably is a reason, I don't know off the top of my head. And so in those moments, feeling the feels, you'd have heard this if you're in this space at all of personal development, understanding yourself, self-help. It's easier said than done though, because my instinct, as I mentioned earlier, is to Google. I will Google why. I want to understand why, because if I feel like I know why, then I can feel like I can sort the problem. But sometimes I have to put the phone down and just cry, get under the blanket, turn the lights off, whatever it is to do that. You don't want to stay in that state for too long because you don't want to spiral down. And that document spoke about the spiraling of what happens if you let things get out of hand. Essentially, over time, you become more withdrawn in many senses. You then engage with people less, which then only feeds more loneliness, and so on. From my understanding, my acknowledgement of how I feel is important. Naming it, lonely. I inquire about why I think I feel lonely as well. But in both scenarios, what I did is reach out to people. Reach out and explained or brought up the fact that I felt that way. The first time I did it last week, because I don't think I've done this so consciously before, it was wrapped up in an answer, because it was by a text message. It was wrapped up in an answer where I'd said something on the lines of, they'd said, what's up? And I said, I think I'm just finding it difficult to change into this kind of way of life, blah, blah, blah. And in the middle it said, I think I'm feeling quite lonely. And then there was some more stuff about adjusting and new way of life. And I sent that, and I was speaking to that person the day after. So we'd arranged to actually talk about it rather than it just be, a quick check-in. But in the time I had between sending that and then actually seeing them to talk, I knew that answer was BS. That answer, the only bit that mattered was the bit in the middle. But it was something to protect myself and feel like I gave an excuse. I don't really understand it fully, but it wasn't true. This way of life, I'm thoroughly enjoying. I love, at the moment, just having the freedom and the casual, flexible element of work. Like, oh, I'm going to work next Thursday. Great. I'm around on Friday morning if you need me. I love it. And I don't know what I was doing there. Was I doing what I expected them to say back to me as like, oh, well, it's probably that. I don't know. But it's that idea that you say something because it gives an excuse to why you feel that way. When the truth is, maybe there are some elements of that setup that contribute to that, but this is not a new feeling. This is something that is there. reaching out and admitting it is easier said than done, because the wrapping up showed that it wasn't something that I was just going to outright say. Whereas yesterday, I can't remember what I said on the text message yesterday, other than that I thought I needed a phone call, because my brother had said, what do you want? But on the phone, I admitted it quite plainly this time. And I suppose because I had the good positive reaction from the first person I explained it to, i.e. they invited me over to be company in general, but to also talk about it and explain that it is normal to feel that way as well. I had space held for me, and that's important. Finding people that you can express yourselves to is important. And this is a bigger topic. This topic is going to go on so much longer than this video ever could right now. It's a complex thing. But from my experience, it is about feeling those feelings and then reaching out. Now, some of you will feel like, because of the loneliness, you don't have those people to reach out to. And it is hard to admit it. Sometimes I will go for the people, the people I'm speaking to are in my top 5 people that I would talk to. But I also am very careful as to who I talk to and when and how much they've supported me in the week with other things or along the same lines or before. It's not something I go to one of those with. There's also the element of just what if they weren't around? Like, it's absolutely possible that you either don't have people around in general, or the people that you would talk to aren't available for whatever reason. And so where do you go then? At that point, I would look for, and I don't have them to hand, but there will be online services that you could access, paid or unpaid, I imagine, if you felt that you needed to do that. And sometimes an anonymous format is going to work better for you in the initial points, because admitting it to people that you know and have an impression of you, you might feel that that's unexpected. Whilst I haven't necessarily expressed loneliness before, people in my circle have seen me upset before. They obviously know a lot of my history as well, and I've been quite open over the last few years with them in that sense. So it's unsurprising if I then express loneliness per se, even though it still feels hard. And to me, I still feel like I'm being a burden. It's one of the biggest things for me, is that in order to try and connect with others as one way of working on a solution to this, I feel sometimes like a burden in doing that. And that's why it's important to talk to a number of people. Like, if I'd called the same person as I had the week before and then asked them to meet up and done that twice, that's quite heavy on one person. So utilising a second person is quite useful. And then obviously using the other people in your network too. That doesn't stop it feeling like a full burden at times. And my brother said, he was like, don't feel like that, because people are there for you for that reason. Like, people, if they knew you were feeling that way, wouldn't want you to feel that way and would want to help if they could. And you have to remember that by making that call, reaching out to someone, anonymous, someone you know, by doing that, you are doing something proactive for your situation. And those people are not specifically helping me. They're there to talk it out with and to give some different perspectives too, to say, yeah, I felt like that as well, or no, I get that, I get what you're saying, I've had that and I've been there, or I was there the other day, or just to come up with, well, what is this about? You know, if you can, therapy is really good. I advocate for therapy. I'm a coach. I'm different to therapy. I don't have the medical training background that they do. A coach is more empowering to the person to get them to think about it. It's also very forward focused, whereas therapy, it looks at, we look back to, but therapists also look forward to, but there is a lot of like historical, why is it this way, what is it, and changing thought patterns, of which you can do yourself, but a therapist is there, dedicated, and has different strategies for you to use. Any kind of expression, and then alongside any guidance and advice and support, you won't want a therapist forever. You might become really reliant on them, but actually you want people in your life that you can rely on. You want that network, you want that belonging, and this all takes time. I won't go into the details of how long it takes to make friends and best friends. Everything takes time. It's not overnight. It is one foot in front of the other, very, very slowly. It's not just going to magically happen. But loneliness is normal. I think it's something like 1 in 4 to 1 in 5. Especially in the millennial age group, where you might not be coupled up, you might not have a family. Families and couples do tend to have that element of belonging. But that still doesn't mean that they don't feel like they have friends. There can still be that lack, even though they have a significant other, a child, anything like that. But it's worth knowing it's something that you can work with. It requires you to acknowledge it, reach out and be vulnerable to try and find that person or people or place to express yourself. Luckily, I'm not in a situation where I get into a spiral mode where it gets worse and worse. It is something that at the moment I have strategies to manage with. I'd like to think that it won't be weekly. I don't know. It's interesting that I don't know why it's come up, and I don't think it always needs an answer. A bit like when someone doesn't want to be with you anymore. Sometimes you don't get that closure. And with this, sometimes I'm not going to know why it comes up. It's a feeling. But feelings pass. Good or bad. Positive or negative. I do remember and hold on to that. So when I was up just now, tidying the kitchen, dancing around, I acknowledged that I felt very different to how I felt last night. I hope that's helpful for you to understand that whilst I look cheery on pretty much every video on TikTok and Instagram, there is a reality behind it. You don't get to see, and that's not just for me. That will be for every person that is someone that you watch. There will be the hard bits. And obviously, you know, let's just take Adele, for example. One, obviously, that her relationship breakdown, her marriage breakdown, but also recently with the video that came out, what will be only a couple of days ago, the cancellation of her tour. And obviously she's very vulnerable and open about that. And you can see that for that in that instance. But with the divorce, like, there would have been a lot of stuff going on, and we can appreciate it, but you don't always hear people talking about it and sharing. And in Adele's case, she was open enough to share about her disappointment at the tour being cancelled and how many lives that would affect. And she knew it was her fan. But just because we're not showing that it's negative as people or as anyone on camera or off camera, doesn't mean that behind closed doors in any scenario that it's not going on. My campaign for compassion, it's something about making sure 2022 encourages compassion for others at all given moments, because you don't know what's going on. You have a different background and set of experiences to the person that sat next to you. I have a different experience to my brother, even though we're very, very similar and have very similar upbringings. The minute we went to different schools, we're different. The minute that our sexuality is different, we're different and have different experiences. And the campaign for compassion, as I've suddenly called it, seems worth thinking about, that even some of our closest friends, relatives don't have the same experiences as us, and being kind is important. I will talk next week on some various other topics and bits and pieces that are coming up, but catch the little snippets on TikTok and Instagram. Until next time.